Hi guys, my name's Daniel and welcome to my studio. So I've been creating visual art since a very young age, as all children do and love to enjoy. I was an absolute huge fan of drawing, and that moved on to paint. I've lived in Bath most of my life. I went to Beach and Cliff School and did art there. Went to study in Cardiff for a number of years, and after graduating I've continued creating, exhibiting and thinking about artwork ever since. I'd say it was mainly during university where I became more accustomed with art history and old master painters, all the guys who worked with oil paint, fresco painting, and the work, which it almost always was unless you were a rich guy back then, the work for the church, all these frescoes, Michelangelo's chapel, these epic spiritual pictures were always very inspiring to me. And yeah, as I say, I discovered that in university, and originally it was a training ground where I could use the work of these old masters to enhance my own ability to create figurative works, to study the form of the face and the flesh and the angles, and building up an underlying framework of how people should look. I also believe the expressions in the face are deeply meaningful, and a single glance or look can convey so much intent, emotionality. It can tell a whole story. So that's always been something quite dear to me, and how delicate a face is when you're working on it. How a simple change of the tiniest mark can alter the inflection, the emotional impact of what the viewer sees. And so that was my introduction, but it's the techniques I learned then still hold true today, and it's an ongoing process that grows. One of the fantastic things about any kind of artistic or creative practice is you see yourself get better. But with something like painting, it can become so idiosyncratic that it becomes entirely your own thing. And in a way, you can teach yourself. You have to teach yourself, because that's the only way. You can study someone else's method, but at the end of the day, one has to let go and come back to your own heart and your own truth when you're applying paint and when you're in that moment of painting. So it's not a closed system. It always has things flowing in and out of it, and it can be anything. You know, it can be a good piece of music. It can be a landscape. It can be a conversation you overhear in the street. You never know what's going to kind of trigger some kind of visual imagination or have an image jump into your brain. So just to give you an example, here's a few things I've got in my box that I reach and grope into to find inspiration. It's all sorts: picture of a cow, a picture from a friend's travels, a Rembrandt, which I think that's Tobias, maybe it's Tobias, I don't know. Images like this, and they're all prone to damage and watermarking. In fact, I think sometimes you get quite a fascinating piece of imagery, actually. Might be better than the original, or better than what I'm painting anyway. I mean, I went through a phase of divers, something so cut off, well, like we all are now. This is me going to the supermarket. Something about that isolation, the emotional isolation, but also the capacity to withstand incredible pressure. There was something about this idea, and these ominous looking things. And then maybe a figure, sort of like this. I'll do multiple printouts of the same thing. This is a wee statuette I saw in Italy, and just thought that's a beautiful thing to have on your wall, and it makes a difference. So there we go, all sorts of crap in it. So I'd say the things that inspire me are essentially quite timeless, such as old master painters, like Rembrandt, Goya, Velázquez, and so on. And ancient literature, myths, old spirituality. So another way I'm gleaning inspiration is anything that appeals to me on the internet, any kind of image, I will download it and add them to my collection of imagery. And there's all sorts in here: suits of armour, curtains, underwater diving pictures, people in suits, people in traditional garb, other people's artwork, classical paintings, animals, and I kind of categorise it. So this is my most recent folder, and I'm looking at a lot of these funny diagrams, things like this, things like that. Joseph Hines, or Joseph Herzstyle, we don't know, apparently. There's Zivlor Bekinski, the guy we can never say his name of. I mean, that's the kind of thing that's exciting me a lot. As I say, it all passes through some kind of filter. But in the past few years, I've been doing work which is very busy. It's got lots of figures in, crowds of writhing masses, and there's usually a central figure on a pedestal, which is like I guess the protagonist, one would say. And what I like to build into the work is multiple interpretations. So it's not like I'm saying one thing. Essentially, people bring their own meanings to it. Obviously, I do have my own narratives to it, what I would perceive the meaning to be. But one of my favourite things is hearing other people's interpretations, especially if it is a vague and eerie, mysterious piece of work. So as mentioned, I became interested in crowds and these epic, swirling images of chaos and order and unpredictability. These paintings were around the theme of judgment. I'd love to talk you through them and what stuff means. But essentially you can see what I became interested in here. Massive writhing bodies. And something about the end times, a kind of feeling of final judgment, the eschaton. And I moved my interests also around to stuff which is a bit more psychedelic, using different symbology, kind of expanding the language. So this one was supposed to be a kind of tsunami, an impending tsunami on the south. So at the moment I'm working on a few paintings at once. I tend to have multiple things on the go, and there'll be things I come back to after years of not working on them, so only to have them reclaim a position in my hierarchy of things I'm finding interesting. And suddenly they make sense, or suddenly a blockage has been cleared. It's a wonderful feeling to revisit work like that. So when I begin a piece, it usually starts off something like this. One of these that I work very abstractly for a long time until something pops out for me. So here's another one which I could show you. There's lots of layers on here, but nothing's come yet. And I do have some ideas. I usually won't start with a drawing. I'll let the piece show me something. So here's a piece somewhere midway, getting towards the other end of completion. So as you can see, I've done a lot of drawing and filled in with colours. I tend to work in lots of layers, so stuff kind of gets destroyed as you go. Stuff sometimes you cherish and then it gets eroded by your next layer. But there is a kind of element of faith to it all resolving itself in the end. Every work is truly its own thing. There's no reason to plan everything out or say reverse engineer a piece. That's not how I work. I don't imagine something in my head and then it appears in that form on my canvas. And it's a journey of discovery, going to new territory, both internal and then the externalizing the internal. And sometimes you don't know where you're going until you arrive. I'm not saying I don't come up with compositions or ideas. Here's a little place where I keep some things that inspire me. So I do a lot of drawing as well, and it's all quite kind of scatty and messy stuff. But sometimes images just pop out and say, this is something I wouldn't mind working on at some point. And something like this is a basis for some of my recent work. So I'm not saying I don't ever start a painting with an idea in mind. I'd rather say I don't set my criteria too high, put it that way, because it's already it can be a hugely frustrating thing. But who wants to make it more difficult by putting ridiculous conditions on oneself? So one would usually go on adding colour and texture to a piece. As you can see here, some of it is darker and richer than other parts of the picture. Stuff gets scratched back, eroded, and then reapplied. And eventually it will come to a point where I'll be trying to make the image more cohesive and bring the elements together. So this one is probably at the end of its time with me. As you can see, there's all these different colours and textures, and that's what really brings me a lot of joy in this kind of work. This is very recent stuff. It's all in the last kind of 6 months, exploring some quite esoteric stuff sometimes. Shapes, geometry, diagrams. I've also recently moved into sculpture. I have been painting these, I call them shrines, and I have one here. And essentially they are pieces of wood that I've painted individually and then assembled. And the idea is that one would hang this in a special place and put objects that may be important to oneself in them. And one of the things I like about it is its configuration can change every day, anytime you want it to. And there's infinite combinations of composition and colour one could pull out of it. So here is one of my little shrines, which I love working on them because they're not carefree, but there's never a pressure to act. It's when something occurs to me, then I will make the move. And it's very simple, it's a devotional work. So here you can see a little piece of wood, and it might be something as simple as me noticing that I'd like a sharp red square here, so I'd simply use masking tape. And the idea is not to make effort. I mean, we're not being worried about being too precise here. We are just we're not doing it willy-nilly. We're just doing it enough. So I'd apply the tape like this, leaving a thin space on my paint. So now I will apply some white that I've got here, try and layer it on quite thickly. I like to build up texture. And it really is a process of noticing what occurs to one as one looks at these objects on the wall, and you just come to an inkling, a feeling that perhaps a line needs to appear here or there, and that sets into motion the action. And these occurrences, they have to be a natural thing. I don't go and stand in front of these shrines and examine them with a beady eye, saying what should be done. No, it's got to be a spontaneous thought. I think I'll just apply some white there too. Now the reason I put white underneath first is to boost the brightness and the strength, the vivacity of the colour. I don't want it to be sucked away by the blue that was here before in any way. And I'm just going to apply a bit of a dark red. Opted for quite a plummy looking tone. And I've actually been impatient. I'm not used to the cameras, so I'm kind of rushing this thing along. But I'm trying to maintain that there are no mistakes. Because at the end of the day, one can always work over the top of one's mistakes. If only real life were like this. And now, I'll allow this to dry. It will probably sit around the studio, I think for a number of weeks, months probably, until I decide to pick it up and use it to create something. So here's another little shrine. As you can see, this one's a bit more colourful, a wee little one. And it has occurred to me to paint figures and things like that inside of them, but that hasn't happened yet. I approach these in a very devotional way. They do take a long time to make, as there's a lot of setting down paint, waiting it for dry, layering. But as is with all my work, it's a marathon. It's a process of endurance. I don't make paintings in one sitting. Like they go on a lot longer. So here is a shrine that I completed over a year ago. As I say, these things aren't my main thing, so it's not like I'm desperately charging forward to work on them. As you can see, I position little objects I find dear upon the shrine. It doesn't normally live in here, for the sake of showing you. I'm also branching out into digital artworks. I'm trying to get more involved with printing and producing artwork that's more affordable to people in like small formats, compression of my large images to make something that is mass producible, mass saleable. So that's in the works. I have found the digital manipulation of some of my previous artworks quite a liberating way to explore the future with your past using technology of the present. If you'd like to find out more about my work, please visit my website, which is www.danielrushforth.com, or you can go to my Instagram, which is updated far more frequently, just Daniel_Rushforth on there. And I hope you're all keeping safe and well during these unprecedentedly weird times. Take care of yourselves, guys, and thanks for watching.